making food for commercial purposes, distributing that throughout the entire country, involves aspects that are very different from cooking the food or preparing the food. And I often say that having a good product might not even be the most important aspect of your business, right? Most of the food business startups go out of business because they ran out of money. It's not because the product was bad. You have investors that might be telling you that you have to have purchase orders before they give you money. The co-packer is telling you, I'm not going to be able to schedule the manufacturing before you commit to it, and they might require that you do a down payment. And then you go to talk to a retailer, and they will say, are you going to be able to deliver 200,000 cases of this product to my stores within a month? But you need to have a product that is commercially viable, right? So that story needs to be something that is not jeopardizing the viability of the product.
Okay, Bruno, welcome to Seed Money. Today we have Bruno Xavier, the Associate Director of the Cornell Food Venture Center. And this is an area that I particularly love. Food product development is fascinating, difficult, challenging, but also a lot of fun. So welcome. So happy to have you here.
My pleasure to be here. Very nice to meet you.
Yeah. So you are obviously exposed to all kinds of stuff going on in the food innovation space. And I think you said your specialty is really that safety component, correct?
Yeah, that's what most of my time is dedicated to. My specialty is actually in more food engineering and product development. It's just our program is mostly focused on providing evaluations of safety for innovative food products.
Very cool. And so would you say most of the people in your program at Cornell are they going there because they already have a food product in development, or are they going there to explore an idea and figure out how to bring it to market?
Mm-hmm. I would say that most of the people that come to us, they already have a prototype. Some of them are already in production at a small scale. And they actually learn about the needs to have a processing authority to evaluate the product when an inspector knocks on their door. They refer them to us, and we guide them through the process of getting the product in their manufacturing facility registered with the proper regulatory agency, maybe the state and maybe FDA or USDA.
Very cool. That is an incredible service. I had a wine company, but it was below 6.5% alcohol. So at that time, it fell in this gray area where I was following FDA guidelines, but still had to follow the alcohol industry regulations. And it was so challenging to navigate all of that. So, and you really do need experts. So I think that makes so much sense that that's what you guys are doing. And I can only imagine that saves, these entrepreneurs tons and tons of headaches of trying to figure it out on their own. And it's not like you can just Google that stuff and find it. There are particular paths to navigating food safety and regulations for sure.
Yeah, that's an area where having access to an expert in that specific sector, right, for that specific product may save you a lot of time. But, you say that Google might not be able to answer that. But today with AI, I think there's a lot available, a lot more available just in the past 2 years that these chat GPTs and so on, they can respond to a lot of these questions, actually. And it's pretty amazing.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, that's really good to know. That's amazing. I use Chat GPT a lot, but I haven't really used it for research. So that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Today we get some inquiries from clients that say, well, you don't sound like you need any help from me by reading an email. And they say, oh, no, I didn't write that. I just asked ChatGPT.
I love it. Oh my God, that's crazy, isn't it? Oh my gosh, very cool. Okay, so what, to dive into a little bit, like what are you seeing as some of the biggest challenges that these entrepreneurs are facing as let's say they're making their product at a small scale, like you said, maybe in their kitchen, selling it at farmers markets or something like that. And they want to take it to the next level. They want to scale their product. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing as, that they really need to dial in before they can take that next step?
Mhm. Yeah, food entrepreneurship in food and agriculture in general, right? It's quite unique because we all have a direct relationship with those products that we decide to manufacture as an entrepreneur, right? So we think that we understand a lot about food, and indeed we do. We know how to make food, but making food for commercial purposes, distributing that throughout the entire country, involves aspects that are very different from cooking the food or preparing the food. And I often say that having a good product might not even be the most important aspect of your business, because it's such a huge challenge to make a product that can be distributed in the cheapest way possible. Usually has to be stable at room temperature for a very long time. And you still want it to look good, have the right texture, and the nutritional aspects also have to be preserved. So basically, you want to have a fresh product, very natural, very nutritious, that lasts forever, right? And you're always having to make sacrifices to make that affordable. So understanding about other things beyond preparing the food is a big bucket that gets a lot of your answer. The answer to your question will be at. But beyond that, the business of food involves making the food, marketing, distributing, retailing the food. And all of those aspects might actually cost a lot more than what the entrepreneur, having that perception of the food industry as primarily focused on preparing the food, might not have an initial appreciation of. For instance, one thing that surprises a lot of our clients when they are just starting is how much of the final cost of the product will come to their pockets. And it might be 30%, 40%. You mentioned that you were in the alcoholic beverage space before. In that space, you might have a profit margin that is a little bit better. But in the food industry, the margins are extremely thin, especially for the food manufacturers. And scale becomes an extremely important factor, right? Sometimes you see a product in the shelf, the product, you try that product and say, oh, how come they cannot make this better? I can make that much better at home. I will compete. But when you look at the cost breakdown, it's not something that you can really compete with. And I would even give an example, right? Mayonnaise. If you're trying to make mayonnaise at home, or you both taste better, right? I remember my mom used to make that at home using olive oil. It was awesome. But it will cost much more than what you pay at the grocery store if you try to make it and sell. So there are many examples like that, right? So understanding the business of food and accepting that food manufacturing is not often the most limiting step to have a successful product in the market is usually the biggest shock that these manufacturers have.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And I think to lead into a question I have for you, like, for example, food, there's a lot more risk for stuff going wrong in the production process also, right? It's not as stable, like you said. There's just more room for error, it seems. And one of the things that happened to me, I had some pretty major production issues in the very beginning, lost a lot of production. When I was in that space, I had a lot of friends in the food space. And even though I was in alcohol, I still couldn't get it profitable. It was crazy. The amount, it cost me. We were giving up margin to the distributor, to the retailer, the marketing, like you said. And, and then of course the distributors are telling me it needs to cost less, and the retailer, it needs to cost less. I'm like, I'm already not making money. I can't bring the price down. But with that, one of the things I wish I had done differently is had more of a, like in that raising that first initial $500,000 that I raised to go out and do a bigger production run and then lost all the production basically, like worst case scenario, but that stuff happens, right? So how do you recommend, like when margins are razor thin like that, what kind of buffer do you recommend entrepreneurs build in for issues that might pop up? Or how do you kind of talk through that with entrepreneurs of like, okay, you have a razor thin margin, you need to anticipate having, reserves or something like that to be able to weather those when things pop up and you have those really thin margins. I'm kind of curious just what your perspective is there.
Yeah. Probably the simplest side of that question is try to have money, right? Most of the food business startups go out of business because they ran out of money. It's not because the product was bad, the project was bad. It's because they went through an unexpected situation such as the one that you mentioned, and they didn't have enough money to get through it. If they did, maybe the business will be an extremely successful, case study that we will be talking about today. So that's something to be very aware of. But in general, and that includes the money part, you have to talk to a lot of people. Food entrepreneurs in general, they need to spend a lot of time, and today is a lot easier, right? But on the phone, on Zoom, and visiting people, getting to know your competitors, see the competitors that might be willing to talk to you, that might be able to share experience, those that might be willing to become partners. A lot of that happens, right? And as we start in the entrepreneurship side of life, we may come with that idea that everything is competition. Everybody that is doing something similar to you will want to put you down, will not contribute to your success, and it's often not true. Because experienced entrepreneurs understand that it's very common that the closest competitor might become your biggest partner in just one flip of the coin in the next deal that happens, or whoever gets acquired by whom, or which clients might be working with you today as a co-packer, and tomorrow they need to double, triple their capacity. That's when you pick up the phone and talk, hey, Jayla, remember we talked a lot about this? You want to share this client with me because otherwise I will lose it. So we have to be extremely flexible and talk to people, understand what the competition is, where are the bottlenecks in that sector, and really learn. And again, that has to be reflected in your team. We might think that what we need in the food business is people that know how to make food. No, we need people that know how to make food, how to make food stable, how to make food safe, how to put food in a truck, how to get that truck on time, how to keep the temperature. There are so many details that are extremely relevant to the success of the product. And again, that's why I say having a good product is much more than making taste and look good.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Yeah, I think that, it's interesting, even not in a food-based product. I saw a pitch deck the other day, and the person was raising, I think, $200,000. And it just didn't seem like there was enough money there, right? And it was like, oof, they're going to run out. They could run out really quickly. Mm-hmm. So is that something you work with on like the projections with those entrepreneurs of like, here's probably, here's what the projections should look like to go out and raise money and make sure you have enough money and what your fundraising strategy is. Because there's a lot to that. If you go out asking for too little money, that can raise a red flag for investors, right? Because they know issues are going to pop up. Is that something you guys work on with those entrepreneurs also? Yeah.
Yeah, not me specifically, right? Mm-hmm. I understand a little bit about that today because of the experience that I have working with people that are more business oriented. That's part of the Center of Excellence in Food and Agriculture, right? Which is a program funded by New York State. And it was great because we've been working with food entrepreneurs in the Food Venture Center for 30 years. I'm not there for 30 years, but what happens is, okay, most of those business will have a short life, 3 years, 5 years. But those that actually had a very successful product and business model, they would come to us 2 years later and say, "Hey, Bruno, actually that works. I'm selling. What do I do next? Where can I find a co-packer who can sell me, gigantic shipments of packaging and just crazy ingredients?" And we couldn't help on the business side. So the Center of Excellence now has business support specialists that bring that knowledge, and it kind of becomes a one-stop shop for food and agriculture entrepreneurship. It's a lot of fun. I think I do feel privileged for a variety of reasons, and having that opportunity to learn from my colleagues in business is just one of them. The other is because I work in food safety. For those that are doing their job right, they come to us before they launch the product, sometimes 6 months, a year before. So we get to see what's coming. So that's phenomenal, and then we can prepare. And as we work with the business development, business support specialists, we can tell them, hey, there's a lot of people making, for example, cold brew coffee in 2016, 17, 18. Everybody was going into that, right? And I even had a conversation with a colleague at the time. So coffee prices will go up like crazy because it just takes more coffee grinds to make it, right? Coffee grounds to make it. And people start drinking a lot more coffee during the summer. So we get to see these types of things. And anyways, we learn a lot, and it's a lot of fun.
Oh, that is so cool. Um, Talking about co-packers a little bit, I think that is typically a big one, right?
It is.
How to find a co-packer, how to get a co-packer to take you on when you're like this big, right? What do you suggest? Like, and which comes first, the orders or the co-packer? Like, do you think entrepreneurs should go talk to, for example, go get Whole Foods to say they'll, get a letter of intent that Whole Foods will carry your product, and then you can get the co-packer? Or in what's going on today, is it like you can go get a co-packer with small minimums and then you go pitch the retailers, or do you do it all together? Like, what do you recommend in terms of a strategy for like getting a co-packer and getting a retailer, and how that kind of connect?
Yeah. Yeah. I sometimes say it might be easier to get married than get a co-packer.
I know, it's
Because
crazy.
it's just so difficult, right?
No, no.
First of all, whenever you're making a product, it's very rare that you're going to have more than a dozen co-packers in the country that will be able to take you on. If you see what types of machine equipment they need, and the scale, availability, you will end up with 5 to 10 possible co-packers, right? But you're going to have to probably make 100 calls or more to find a few of them. So we don't realize how specific the food manufacturing process is to your product, right? Well, you may need to cook, agitate, dry, and pack into pouches. Well, every single one of those steps includes means that a bottleneck. Because if you are a co-packer, what you want to do is always exactly the same thing. You want to have one kettle, one filler, one type of packaging, right? So they try to be as lean as possible when it comes to equipment. They don't want to carry all that cost of maintenance and of course, paying for the equipment and so on. But innovation, of course, suffers a lot, right? So if you have an innovative product, if you want to use a different type of packaging or a new ingredient, then it makes it very difficult to find co-packer. And maybe I feel a little bit more about that because our clients tend to be more on the innovative side. But indeed, it's a big challenge finding a co-packer. Now, timeline for that is, well, we have to have everything done by a week ago. And then because you have investors that want they might be telling you that you have to have purchase orders before they give you money. The co-packer is telling you, I'm not going to be able to schedule the manufacturing before you commit to it, and they might require that you do a down payment. And then you go to talk to a retailer, and they will say, are you going to be able to deliver 200,000 cases of this product to my stores within a month? And the answer is it's impossible. It's a puzzle that food manufacturers that are starting up will always try to solve as best as they can. But usually, what may happen is that you will start small, right? You might not start in a co-packer. You might start in a commercial kitchen, or even in our pilot plant. Sometimes we can, depending on the how much of the product that is needed for a test run, we may be able to help a co-pack manufacturer make, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000 units of product that will allow them to put it in one store for a week and see how it goes, or things like that. But whenever you get to scale, there is always a big step. There is no way out of that. When you go into national distribution, you're always talking about a gigantic step. And that's where simplifying your process, looking at the product that is less likely to lead to problems like, having difficulty reaching a certain quality parameter. That's the most important. And we look at products that are successful in the shelf, right? And that is always true. They have simple manufacturing processes. Sometimes we have clients sending us their current manufacturing process and involves like 25 steps. So that will never, you will never be able to do that at scale. You will never be able to find a co-manufacturer that can do that at a reasonable cost for you. So simplifying is a key to reduce that time that a manufacturer can tell you how long it's going to take for them to adapt to your process and how much it's going to cost to make your first a commercial batch. That brings another problem. It's always a lot of product that they want you to commit to make, right? So you need to have that connection with the retailers already established, and hopefully the co-packer will not have a problem. He's going to delay 2 days, and then the distribution is going to get delayed, and you're not going to get your delivery to that retailer in time. Things that can happen and can lead to a lot of problems. And maybe looping back to what we started to talk about, the cost, right? Not only you're going to get only 1/3 of that final cost of the product, you as a food manufacturer will probably have to work to shoulder most of the risk. If the product spoils before the distribution, if anything happens during transportation, if the product doesn't sell, that all come back to you. If you're selling online, for example, often the terms are very brutal. If they decide, the online distributor decides that there's a consumer complaint there that they're too concerned about, they will pull your product and you're going to be forced to ship it back to yourself. And then you're going to address the consumer complaint, and it might be nothing. It might be a completely misunderstood idea about the product. They use in a way that it was not expected, and so on. So there's a lot that the manufacturer, startup food company will learn if they only come with a food preparation, food manufacturing background.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think that is a big challenge in food in particular is you can only, you're having to deliver consistently. They're not going to order 6 months worth up front, right? So you have to be getting time on that co-packer's schedule consistently and then making sure the sell-through is there to support, the new run. And it is a balancing act. I think also the point you made about trying to be too innovative, I definitely made that mistake, and I think like the super excited, passionate entrepreneur who says, I want to use this different packaging. This would be so cool. We need to stand out. We need to be different. And then it's like you jump through so many hoops trying to find a co-packer to make this different thing, and it costs way more money. And, looking back, like my example was at the time, just putting wine in an aluminum can. This was in 2011. It wasn't cool. Like nobody was really doing that yet. Sofia Coppola was the only one in a little can. And I was like, I don't want to put mine in a can. I want it to be in an aluminum bottle because it was different. And that meant much higher minimums, a different co-packer. And looking back, I'm like, God, if I had just put it in the aluminum can, I could have done much smaller production runs. I could have tested the market with a lot less money. And so I think that is a big lesson for people who are in that early stage. Like, it's okay to kind of match the co-packer's capabilities to start. And then as you grow, become more innovative in your packaging. But it's very challenging right out of the gate to do something like super innovative packaging wise. So yeah, I think that I think that makes a lot of sense. It's so hard to do that though, because you want to be different, and you feel like it's such a big sacrifice to just do what everybody else is doing. But you don't need to have everything be different to be competitive, right? Like you said. So
yeah, we're driven by passion, right? When we get into entrepreneurship, I think in most cases, what I see is that, and sometimes that's another thing that I like about my job. Working with food is phenomenal because people like to express themselves through food, right? It's about, paying homage to my family, to where I came from, to who I am, and people want to share that. I think that's beautiful. So I feel very privileged to hear about those stories. Well, why did you get to this product, right? But then it limits, right? Because now I am not able to pivot on my initial idea of what the successful commercial product will be. Well, maybe I wanted to use this, I don't know, to think about to use a very simple type of product, right? I used to make this type of tomato sauce with tomatillos. Wow, they taste delicious. It's very high bricks and the taste is unique. Well, you will not going to be able to today source the quality of the tomatillos that you were able to get from your garden in Brazil. And that's an experience of mine, right? I didn't try to make it, but I know if I tried to make that tomato sauce that my mom used to make from tomatillos, it would be very difficult to get that to the market. Maybe not as much as anymore, but because things are changing so fast. But the fact is the tomatoes that are used for commercial production of tomato sauce, ketchup, and all that are completely different from what we buy at the store, right? So things that we need to learn. And if we start with that passion about that specific product, when you hit a bottleneck like that, you're not going to be able to solve it. You're just not going to have enough money to change the entire food system around that product and make your product successful.
yeah, no, I think, man, that is the truth, and that is the tough part about our whole food system and scaling. It totally makes sense. I think. What are your thoughts on? Because I do agree that is one unique thing about the food industry is typically a lot of these small companies that come up. It is the entrepreneur's passionate story, the why behind it, that is what gets a lot of the retailers excited, right? And investors. Which retailers are you seeing right now, and how important, like, as a best starting place to be able to leverage that personal story as a selling point to get in? 10 years ago, Whole Foods was still very much, they had a local buyer who would source local products, and they really loved that story. Like, what's your story? Why are you doing this? What's unique? So do you see that as still being very important in having as part of your pitch to retailers as well as investors, like what that personal story is behind the why? And, any tips on how to best kind of leverage that story and that passion?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do think that has a huge importance, right, in the decision about establishing that partnership or not with the manufacturer. But for several reasons, right? It's not simply because they want to be able to market that story. That does have value, and if you have a good product and a good story behind it, that certainly adds value. But you need to have a product that is commercially viable, right? So that story needs to be something that is not jeopardizing the viability of the product, because we all love products that are sustainable, organic, and so on. But very few people are actually willing to pay more for that. The reality is that most people make their purchasing decision with the first impression that they have of looking at the product, the marketing that goes into interfering in that reaction, right? So you might have seen that logo or anything on the TV about that product, and you might not even realize. But when you see that product on the shelf, you will have that reaction and make that purchasing decision. But the second one, and sometimes that happens at the same time, is the cost, right? You forget about anything else and you go by the cost. So, and that's why so many grocery stores, they are able to basically make a very similar product to what they have on the shelf, because they take basically a right on the marketing for the other product of the traditional brand, and they put their product side by side with it, and you see, okay, this is the ketchup I want, but look, this store brand here looks exactly the same. Everything on the label is the same, and they buy it, right? It's because it's about money, and let's not forget, a lot of people today, a lot of us need to reduce the cost, the amount of money that they spend on food. So it is a need. It's not simply saving time or being too tired to spend 2 minutes making every decision about what you buy. It's a need to save money on those things. So we need to be cognizant of all these factors that go into that purchasing decision, and not only on the story, on what we want to sell. Retailers have a great advantage because everybody that comes to them, no matter what story they have behind the product, they already have a product, right? So they can add layers of evaluation that they can take into account when they decide if they're going to take a product in or not. So all those great, phenomenal stories about the entrepreneurs that would have been highly valuable for that retailer, well, they might be, this is not a commercially viable product. I would not even consider that. It's not even going to get to that point. They might not even take that phone call because it's not adequate for them. But one thing is true. If you can get a product that is commercially viable, but you also show that there is a reason why you do it. So my company has a purpose. I have a purpose when I make this product. Being able to sell this product through you will help me achieve my purpose. That is something that is extremely valuable. Anyone that works with entrepreneurship knows that purpose is what differentiates successful from unsuccessful companies. Purpose is what's going to keep you awake for another hour. That's going to keep you working for another 2 hours whenever you have a delivery that is waiting for you, right? If you're just making it for money, it's usually not enough.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's basically like you got to hit all the points, right? It's like the 4 Ps: the product, the package, the pricing, the promotion, and but if you have all those other things, the story can be the thing that like drives it home and differentiates, which I think is very cool. Because that's the thing the big companies can't get, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the motivation for the small entrepreneurs is there is value. Like if you can get all those other things, especially if you can work with a program like you guys have and make sure you've got these other things positioned the right way, your pricing's accurate and appropriate and competitive enough. And then you have your story and your passion, you really can. Like, it's amazing. Some of these small companies, it's like the story, Coca-Cola spends millions and millions of dollars to launch a new product and it fails. And then some little person comes out of nowhere with this product, So that story, like you said, is powerful if you have the other things also, lined up. Okay. So I think final thing, since safety is your specialty, I want to touch on that. I used a company called the National Food Labs in Northern California. Yeah. And I thought it was so cool because I just didn't even know that existed. And they basically like put my product in a capsule and they sped up time and said how, what it would be in 6 months later on the shelves. So talk a little bit about, what types of things do you guys do to establish shelf life and food safety, and like what kinds of things do people, at this early stage, if they're thinking about scaling their product, what do they need to consider for safety, or just any thoughts on that you have?
Yeah. Well, that will be a long conversation, right?
Yeah.
A few important points is that definitely consult with a food safety specialist early on to make sure that there aren't any red flags about your product, right? You might see something, well, why aren't people selling these green juices, right, in shelf stable? Well, there are reasons for that. It's very difficult to make that product remain green, for example, once you have to apply a thermal process to make it shelf stable. But in some situations, some of these great ideas might lead to very dangerous outcomes, like bringing a product that doesn't have any controls for Clostridium botulinum is something that we see very often as becoming a gigantic problem for some startup companies, because if an inspector pulls a product from the grocery store, like takes a sample of your product and tests the pH, it's supposed to be acidic and it's not, well, that's an immediate class 1 recall that you're going to have to deal with. And those cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Usually, the average cost of a recall in the United States is $10 million.
Wow.
Of
Oh
course,
my gosh. Yeah.
that is very biased by very large recalls that can cost hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, right? But the fact is, it's always a very expensive, very painful cost. So having an idea of the level of risk that your product's going to be at is extremely important right in the beginning. That may determine the type of processing decisions that you're going to have to make, the type of packaging that you're going to have to use, and evaluate what would be the changes that you might be able to implement early on to reduce those risks. Because, of course, that the earlier those decisions are made, less economically impactful they will be, right? And one thing that I think is also very important is that insurance companies and often investors in the food sector don't have a great idea about that, how food safety impacts their own investment, right? It's just because we take that for granted. Whenever we go to a grocery store, we're taking so much about food safety for granted, right? We don't ask those questions. We assume it to be safe. And we do that throughout. So sometimes we see those investment decisions being made before the products are properly evaluated. And there are many programs that will do that for free, such as our program. We will always answer email. We will almost always be able to respond to a phone call. Eventually we will. But there is a lot of information that is funded by the government, either state or federal government, because we want to make the food system safe for everyone. Of course, that is an interest of anyone in the food manufacturing system. And that's another advantage of working with food safety, Jayla, because we do share a lot. Processing authorities, I don't know, there's probably a few hundred, between 100 and 1,000 processing authorities in the United States. And we talk to each other quite a bit. We share, hey, I have this product here. Maybe they work exactly with the same product every day. They work for competing firms, but they will share information. What do you think? We're thinking about this change. Should we be concerned? What temperature you think we should be using? Because the ultimate goal here is to ensure the safety of the public, right? So I think it's a beautiful thing. And I always try to remind our colleagues that we do that, because it's not often that we can see people getting together with a common goal in mind. I like that. But anyways, get the food safety information about your product in mind, get that checked, probably talk to more than one person, as you should always do, and evaluate the impact of that feedback on how the product is going to look like, or the processing conditions that you're going to have to implement to make the product safe. Stability comes after that, right? It may be limited. You may have to sell your product frozen or refrigerated, and you would prefer to sell shelf stable. Maybe the shelf life of the product is going to be limited by a specific type of microorganism that will challenge even the stability at room temperature of your product. And you're going to have a product that is stable at room temperature for 3 months. And remember that not only microbial safety and microbial shelf life is a possibility to limit the shelf life of the product. It may have oxidation, changes of color, changes of texture that you may also need to evaluate. those tests that you refer are called accelerated shelf life studies, right? And they are a good estimate for how the product is going to perform over time. But it's just an estimate. It will have to do, the closer you are to the actual distribution or conditions, the more accurate they're going to be. So the message there is start thinking about that as early as you can, because then you can start the shelf life studies, right? Have them going. Put a product on the shelf, put a product in the fridge, and do that yourself. You don't need to be testing. You will know your product better than anybody else. Any food entrepreneur can have an idea of how long the product will last on the shelf. But having that idea about food safety first is extremely important, right? You don't want to be poisoning yourself while trying to see how long the product will last for.
Yeah, no, that I think is, critical, right? To understand, especially when it comes to safety, putting it out there to the public. And like you said, it's not just safety. It's like, is it going to taste as good? Because if you spend money to get a customer and 3 months from now it tastes a little funky and they don't buy it again and they tell their friend not to buy it, that's not good. So
we say that
I
you
think
have
that's
one
important.
shot. If that first purchase is not successful, they will never touch your product again.
Yeah, it's crazy. So tell us, I guess, one last thing. I feel like we've talked about so many challenges, right? Is it a good time to be in the food space? Are you seeing entrepreneurs able to raise money right now? Like overall, I'm always amazed. Like I love going into the grocery store and I'm like, you see something new and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's not out. That's a new thing and not out before. So I feel like there's always room for innovation. Are you seeing it still be a good space to get into? Investors are, funding these types of deals? Like, what's your kind of perspective on that big picture?
Mm-hmm. I think the conversation is often biased by big movements in the industry, right? So we tend to look at these big deals of millions of dollars, and then we say, oh, there's a lot happening, lots of mergers and acquisitions and so on. But we get to see what very small manufacturers, very small entrepreneurs are doing, as well as some big manufacturers, right, with their innovation. And is as busy as ever. We get as many samples as we ever did. The Food Venture Center in 2016, when I started, we were receiving about 1,200 samples a year. Now it's more than 3,000. It keeps growing, and I cannot say that is an increase in number of entrepreneurs, right? Maybe people are learning more about what we do, and more people are sending their products. But the fact is that there's a lot of innovation. Is it a good time? I think so, because what's happening is that people are learning more, right? We have a lot more information available to us. People, I see a tendency that people are defining themselves around what they eat. I am a vegan person, right? I do not eat these types of products. I spend more money on my food. All these things are becoming more part of our identity. And as you said, large food manufacturers will not be able to respond to specific needs. These are niche products. And I think what we are seeing in terms of small brands that are actually very profitable, I think the number of those companies is increasing. And not all successful companies will become unicorns, right? There are some family business that will stay as a family business, but they will be making enough money to fund themselves and have a comfortable life. But they would not be able to sell that specific, maple syrup produced in that region, aged in oak barrels. They'll not be able to sell millions and millions of dollars of that. But they will have a business, and I think we have to be aware of how far this business will go. And early on, we start thinking about what's the best exit for me. Is there an exit? Should I be creating this business, expecting that I will be able to sell it for tens of millions of dollars? Or no, the maturity of my business is when I can actually have stable sales, and we will be able to stay at this size, maybe I can start exporting and all that, but will not become a global company, right? Understanding your business, I think, is extremely important. And it comes down to something that we hear, right? How does success look like for me when I'm starting this project?
Yeah, I think that is so important. Understanding that success looks different for different people, right? And it is not all about that you have to be the unicorn to reach success, right? You can have, like you said, a profitable business that you're really passionate about, feel really good about what you're putting out into the world, and it doesn't have to go crazy, right, to be successful. And I think understanding that up front. So when you do have to bring in investors, you can find people that align with that goal. Because if you bring in investors that are expecting the unicorn, but really you're happy to be here, there's going to be a misalignment, right, when you're trying to grow. So yeah, I think that's totally important.
I was just going to say that adding to that, right? Understanding how success looked like for you. It is important that the entrepreneur understands what is it that my business does best, right? And sometimes you might realize that what you really like to do, your purpose, is to develop new products. So maybe your business should not be a food company. Maybe it should be a product development consulting company. Or maybe you like to be in the lab and analyzing foods and giving reports about that. There's a lot in the food business beyond simply, or I wouldn't say simply because manufacturing food is not simple, but only making food. There is more to it than preparing it, distributing, sourcing ingredients. That's phenomenal business to be in as well. And understanding what is it that is your purpose and what is it that you do best might help you pivot and take advantage of the opportunities that might show up as you're learning more about the business, right? Well, the bottleneck for me here is creating this type of equipment to my specific jars. While looking to the equipment manufacturing business too, sometimes you can find opportunities there, right? Maybe your investors are more interested in that than in selling the product. And we've seen some of those pivots and some fascinating stories, but that ability is also very important for successful food entrepreneurs, right? Pivot as you learn more about the business that you're getting yourself into.
I love that. Yeah, keep an open mind, and yeah, don't be afraid to pivot is, wow, great advice.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us lastly, if someone's interested in your program, what how does it work? Length of time? What would they do to try to get in? Any advice?
Yeah, the work that we do is reviewing the products and processing steps to make sure that the final product is safe and stable, depending on the conditions that the manufacturer wants to distribute it as. That work in the United States is called processing authority, right? The FDA, if that's the regulatory agency that that is in charge of your product, they will not tell you to what temperature for how long you have to cook your product for to make it stable and safe. That is the work of a processing authority, right? The processing authority issues a document called the scheduled process or process review. Usually those are the most common names. And then that scheduled process will determine exactly what processing conditions you have to achieve to make the product shelf stable and safe. And one thing that I think is important to mention too is production records, right? I mentioned that recalls in the United States can cost millions of dollars. And the average is about 10. Even so, most companies are still relying on paper records to keep track of what they did, and that's extremely important. 2 years from now, finding a piece of paper out of hundreds of thousands of production records is a challenge, and that may be essential for you to respond quickly and efficiently to a request for information about a product that was manufactured within the shelf life still. So the scheduled process will determine the information that you must have on the production records that you need to produce every day when you're making product, right? So we issue those scheduled processes, as I said, about 2,500 of those a year. Some of the samples that we've received do not make it to that point because some of those products are just not possible to be manufactured as the client originally wanted to. So we've been doing that for 30 years. And over the years, we became also conscious of the need to provide more help for those food manufacturers that need some help developing their products to reach those processing conditions that are necessary, right? So you have to make the product. You are not cooking it to the right temperature. If you cook it, the product separates. Is there any solution for that? So we have a pilot plant in which we do provide that support for product development. We have a food microbiology lab that helps us with all kinds of studies in the microbiology side of things, shelf life and safety, microbial challenge studies as well. And recently we started working with companies that are using fermentation, advanced fermentation processes to produce food ingredients, right? So if you think about these companies such as, Perfect Day, Air Protein, Better Meats, to mention a few that we have worked with, they are producing ingredients using fermentation. So producing ingredients that are very valuable, such as lactoferrin, for example, from fermentation. Instead of separating it from 2,000 liters of milk, you actually run a fermentation, you produce a large quantity of it with a much smaller impact on the environment and much more affordable as well. So we call that the fermentation farming laboratory, which we are very happy to lead. And the goal of all these programs is to propel technology into the food and biotechnology sector, food and agriculture sector, so that these companies have access to cutting-edge technologies from the food processing to microbiology and biotechnology technologies, so that the best ideas become commercially viable within the existing food systems. So we have all kinds of projects. People are just using a different ingredient to make a cookie. Some people are trying to find a completely different way of making a product that will replace milk without cows. And we try to help them all. I am a true believer in the competition that we have within this sector for better technologies. I think that today we are in a situation where food manufacturing and food production in general is still contributes to the negative impacts of human activities that leads to climate change, for example, while we could be part of the solution. We could be actually helping capture CO2. We could be reducing tremendously the amount of emissions that we produce by creating practices, establishing practices that already exist. So there's a lot of space for innovation in the food system throughout, from food manufacturing, food production, distribution, retail, and so on. And our programs are here to help. And we have a variety. The Food Venture Center is just one. We have several programs related to that within Cornell University. And we are happy to connect anyone that is interested through the Center of Excellence in Food and Agriculture, which, maybe you can put the link somewhere here.
Yeah, definitely.
I like when people it's right here.
Yeah.
But yeah, just send us an email and be happy to help.
Wonderful. And do people have to live close by, or is it where they can send their samples and kind of work through the program remotely?
No, we are open to business. Anyone can send us a sample. We do provide a discount to companies in New York because the state subsidizes that.
Oh, that's cool. Mm-hmm. That's great. Wonderful. Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, I was thinking about that before, your perspective on our entire food system, but we'll have to do a separate episode someday on that, because
let's
talk about a long conversation. But our food system is fascinating and challenging, and there's so much that could be done differently, but there are no quick solutions. And so I think, to your point, early stage entrepreneurs looking for ways to innovate and improve things, leveraging, things that exist naturally, like you said, and to, it will be a slow evolution to our food system if we can get it. I'm hopeful that we can, improve our food system over time, but I do believe it would take innovation from the smaller entrepreneurs out there to lead the way, hopefully. So I don't know. It's a big topic.
Let me just add one layer to that. Something maybe for you and your audience to consider, right? I don't think the change is slow. I think when you are in the middle of a tornado, I don't think we realize how fast the winds are.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
And I think we are in the revolution. I was just giving a lecture now about that. And just think about it, right? 20 years ago, would you have imagined that? I was going to ask you a question. Well, maybe you never realized how much it costs to make one genetically modified organism, right? But the fact is that today it costs 1,000 of what it cost just 20 years ago. So, and so all that revolution is happening in real time as we speak. And a lot of those changes will make a gigantic difference in how the food system is going to look like 5-10 years from now. So we have to keep our minds open. Innovation in the food and agriculture system will have a tremendous impact in what we do. And those food entrepreneurs with very crazy ideas should come up to the table. Let's talk, let's discuss, let's learn together, because there's a lot of opportunity there.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay. So yeah, that is motivation right there to go for it, because it's needed and it's happening. And there's, I love hearing that. That actually makes me a lot more hopeful. So
yeah, you can be.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you would like to share? We'll add the link to your program in the show notes for sure. Anything else you'd like to share before we go? Or
no, I'm just happy to be here. Thankful for opportunity to share what we do, and I'd be happy to speak with you again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is so, you have such incredible insight into what's going on and what entrepreneurs are going through. So I really appreciate it. Great conversation.
Thank you, Jayla.
Okay. Thank you, Bruno. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.